Krishna Hare 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 Ram Hare Ram. A bit lower. Ram Ram Hare.
No, it's bass?
No, volume. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram It's too loud. Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram. Okay. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare
Hari Bol.
Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna
Неустойчиво.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. It's okay. Hare Rama Hare Rama Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvise Sanyavade Paschati Vasachara Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srimad Bhagavatam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srimad Bhagavatam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Hare everybody, again. One more time. Namo Vishnu Padaya, Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale, Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Shanti Namane, Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Charine Nirvisesa So, translation is going to be on the phone. I don't know. Today we're going to
use a little.
over on the way home. We were speaking. I forgot your name.
Rajakumar Das.
Rajakumar. Rajakumar and I were speaking. Thank you. About how to deal with when you see things in our movement that you view as not aligned with our philosophy. It could be devotees acting out of pride or acting out of personal interest. Or maybe what you view as mistreatment, even exploitation. Or maybe just bad decisions. What else? That covers it. What else? And you're convinced that it's wrong. And it's discouraging for you to do your service in that environment. So how do you deal with that? Is that the question? How not to get discouraged. But I think it's not how not to get discouraged, it's how to remain encouraged, remain inspired in your service, in spite of that. Well, one thing we know for sure is that Krishna consciousness is transcendental. And the reason we know that is because Krishna is transcendental. Right? And Krishna says anyone who meditates on him is also transcendental, or becomes transcendental. And the word transcendental means above the modes of nature. So all the pain is in the modes of nature, right? That's where all the pain takes place. When we're either acting in the modes of nature or our consciousness in the modes of nature. So, one thing for sure is that if you hear about Krishna, because Krishna is transcendental, his activities always remain blissful no matter what's going on in your life or in the world. That's for sure, right? That doesn't change, right? The holy name is Chintamani. Nama Chintamani Krishna, Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha. The holy name is Krishna. It's transcendently blissful. Rasa Vigraha, it's the form of juice. So no matter what's going on in your life, or in ISKCON, or in the world, whether Donald Trump's the president or not, you like it or don't like it. Whoever is the president or prime minister of your country, you like it or don't like it. Definitely, the process of Krishna consciousness is transcendental. It's not affected by that. It's above the modes of nature, and it's full of knowledge and it's bliss and eternity. We know that. Yes? So that's never going to be affected by what's going on in the world. The problem is we get affected by what's going on in the world. So then the transcendentally blissful process gets contaminated as it filters through our consciousness, which is getting affected. So at least no matter what happens, I think we all have this experience. No matter what happens, if the Bhagavatam class is good, it's good. Right? It's not like it's bad because things aren't going well in your temple. If the Bhagavatam class is good, it's good. And sometimes it's even better when things are going bad because you feel lifted. Right? And if you chant good rounds, the holy name is always good. So that is one thing which is very important to understand. That process, in theory, is not affected by what's going on in the world, although we get affected, and then that affects the process, right? But if we execute the process purely, no matter what's going on, we can be blissful. And I've often told a very interesting thing in my life was that there was a conspiracy in 1970. Some outside influence was conspiring to contaminate the movement, and Prabhupada was very concerned about it. It was coming from India, and there were devotees, I guess you could call them devotees, who were trying to minimize Prabhupada's position. And if you listen to your guru being minimized, it can erode your faith. And if Prabhupada's position were minimized, and the faith of the devotees were eroded, there would be no Hare Krishna movement. So Prabhupada saw this as a very real threat. And he was very, very concerned about it, very disturbed about it. Sometimes we've heard that in situations where there were managerial problems, Prabhupada couldn't translate. His mind was disturbed. He couldn't translate his books. So I was in the temple. I was living. Anyway, I was there with Prabhupada at this time, at least for a little bit. And I didn't know what was going on. It wasn't public information. And I found out by reading the Lilamrita, like whenever I read it. Maybe 7 years after this happened, I read the Lilamrita, and I found out that Prabhupada was very disturbed. And the reason I didn't know is because I only saw Prabhupada at the Guru Puja Bhagavatam class, sometimes going out for a morning walk, or occasionally I would go on the morning walk. And so Prabhupada was his normal self, talking about Krishna, chanting. And so, for a devotee, because they have that process, even though in one sense they're disturbed, but when they're engaged in the process, they're blissful. and they don't, it doesn't affect their service. And even if they're not blissful, it doesn't affect their service. So you could say both things. They're not affected, they're blissful, but even if the problem is huge, like with Bombay, which was very disturbing, it doesn't affect the devotee's service. And the best example, or maybe not the best, but a very good example that Prabhupada gave was Arjuna and Abhimanyu. Was it Abhimanyu? Arjuna's son?
Yeah.
So they're fighting in a battle, and he lost his son. His son was, I don't know if you'd say unfairly killed, but maybe, yes. In any case, he was killed. So it's no small thing to lose your son. And it could easily demoralize you. But as we know, Arjuna fought valiantly and he won the battle. And so Prabhupada made the point that even though Arjuna was obviously upset when his son died, it didn't affect his service. This is interesting, because you have two things which seem to be contradictory. If I'm upset, then my service would get upset. That's how it happens to a lot of us, isn't it? You're doing good, your service is good. You're feeling upset, your service is affected. So Prabhupada was saying, this is a sign of the pure devotee. He lost his son, but his service went on. So here's what's going on in his life. It's on the bottom, and his service is unaffected. So that's a principle. It's another principle. Either we're transcendental, we feel blissful, even though things are horrible, or we don't feel blissful because it's so disturbing, but our service doesn't get disturbed. That's a sign of advancement. Now, there are plenty of things to disturb us because we live in an impure environment. And if you read the newspaper, there are many disturbing things. But what we find for us is that you may read about, this man, he killed somebody, or he stole something, or he molested a child, and we think this is horrible. But if a devotee does it, it's like magnified. What's the word? I want to say the horribility. I don't think that's a word, horribility. But isn't it true that we're disturbed when we hear these things, but when you hear a devotee does that, the intensity of the disturbance is magnified because the devotee is supposed to be pure. Or at least the devotee is not supposed to do that. Did you ever feel like, you read in the newspaper somebody did something horrible. But when you find a devotee did, it's very disturbing, more disturbing. And the more elevated you thought the devotee was, the more disturbing it is, isn't it? So, here's the problem. Well, Prabhupada said it. He said, I had every reason to be discouraged, but I wasn't. So what does that mean? I have every reason to be discouraged, but I wasn't. Because he had the order of a spiritual master. So he wouldn't let anything discourage him, even if it was discouraging. Even if he had valid reason to be discouraged. Prabhu, why are you discouraged? Mataji, why are you discouraged? Because this happened and that happened. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's horrible. Can I do anything? No, I'm just going to go home and sleep and eat chocolate. I'm so upset. Something like that. That might be our response. Yes? You ever done that? Maybe. I remember before I was a devotee, that happened. I had final exams and I had to deal with the draft and this and that, and I just went to sleep. I couldn't deal with it. That was my solution. Just go to sleep. It disappears. So Prabhupada is saying something interesting. We analyzed. He said, I had every reason to be discouraged because nobody helped me. I had to do this alone. I didn't get money from anybody. Indian government gave me such a hard time. My godbrothers, not only weren't they helping me, but some of the godbrothers were criticizing me. I mean, it's kind of discouraging not to get help. But it's really discouraging when you're trying to do something to fulfill the order of your guru and people are criticizing you, isn't it? I mean, being criticized is very discouraging. So Prabhupada was saying, I had every reason to be discouraged, but I wasn't. That's an interesting statement, isn't it? So why wasn't he discouraged? There must have been something encouraging him, right? That's stronger than what was discouraging, or should have been discouraging, and that was the mission, the order of the Guru. So if we reframe that statement, we could say that Prabhupada's saying, I had every reason to be discouraged, but the proper attitude of the devotee is to not allow anything to discourage you. That's basically what he's saying. You can have reason to be discouraged, but a good devotee will never allow those things to discourage you. So, we expect our movement to be ideal in many ways. And due to the nature of human interaction and the bureaucracy of running an organization, a lot of things go on that we look at and say, this is wrong, it shouldn't go on. And the funny thing, interesting thing about it is, sometimes everyone in the movement looks at it and says, it's wrong, it shouldn't go on. And it's just the nature of this human interaction and organization and bureaucracy that no one can figure out how to get around it, or it takes 20 years to figure it out. And these kinds of things can be extremely discouraging. Why is this going on? We've been a movement for 50 years. Why is this person who's supposed to be advanced doing this? There's so many things, right? So I think if we look at Prabhupada's statement, inherent in that statement when he's saying, I had every reason to be discouraged, but I wasn't, because obviously he wasn't focused on it. Now, occasionally, Prabhupada would seem to complain about something, but I think we can agree that he wasn't complaining, but he was explaining a situation so we could understand how to deal with it if we're in that situation. So when he said, my godbrothers never inspired me or helped me, it's an example for us. Maybe your godbrothers or godsisters may not help you. Maybe someday when your guru is gone and you want to do some service, they'll discourage you. They'll be envious. Maybe you'll come out very successful and they'll try to fault you. It could happen. So when Prabhupada spoke about those things, then we can understand he was teaching, showing us that this could happen to you. And you could get easily discouraged if you're not careful. If you focus on it. Like we all know when something bad happens, it's very easy to focus on it, isn't it? It just grabs our attention. I can't believe this happened. I can't believe this devotee did this to me. You know, we were such good friends and now they turned against me. It occupies your mind. So we can see what Prabhupada's saying is don't allow it to occupy your mind. What I find very interesting about controlling the mind is that controlling the mind really means controlling what you're focusing on, where your attention's going. Because when you're disturbed by what that devotee did or what your temple president did or a resolution the GBC made that you think, oh, this is very bad, when you're disturbed by it, what's actually happening is all your attention is focused on it, isn't it? So we say control the mind. So what does controlling the mind mean? It's controlling your attention, because your attention could be focused on so many things. But right now it's for this GBC resolution, I can't believe 17 years, 18 years, and they still won't let women be gurus. And it's upsetting you. For some people, it upsets them, and they can be very focused on it. So your attention, what is your attention going to? So if we are not going to be discouraged, and we can't allow our attention to focus on the things which discourage us, because obviously, if you focus on what's discouraging, what happens? You don't have to be a scientist or a psychologist to understand. You'll be discouraged, obviously, right? So the reality is, there are many things, discouraging things. Just walk down the street, there's trash. That's discouraging, right? The roads, and why are the roads so bad? This is supposed to be city, world headquarters. And there's trash everywhere, and there's no trash cans. And it's like you can just go on and on. In India, there's endless things to complain about, isn't it? You always say it starts with why, and I always say when you're in a third world country, don't ask why, because you'll have endless whys. Why do they do it like this? Why don't they do it like that? Or who? Who's in charge? What? Isn't it? It was like a million whys. There's so many things that are allowed to go on in India that don't go on in other countries. Why do they do this? This is dangerous, or this is illegal. Or in our country, this wouldn't be allowed. Like in America, if you want to put, like in front of your house, or a public building, if you want to put tile, it can't be slippery. It has to be non-slip. Otherwise, they'll make you take it off. Because when it rains, people will slip. And it's illegal, right? So, in India, you have marble and stone everywhere, and when it rains, you just slip. It's not non-slip. It's dangerous. It's actually dangerous. So for us as Westerners, we could be thinking all the time, why do they do this? Why do they do that? Isn't it? And we do sometimes. Look at the dogs. Why doesn't anybody take care of the dogs? Fleas, why don't someone go and spray them? Why don't they have more trash cans? Why is the first floor of this apartment painted, but the second, third, and fourth aren't painted? Or worse, why do they paint it green, purple, pink, and what other color? Blue, yeah. Blue. Why it should be illegal to paint your house this color. You walk by and you get nauseous. That's how we think as Western, isn't it? You ever think like that? We saw a house the other day, right? Looked like a nursery school. We walked by a house and it looked just like a nursery school. It wasn't a nursery school, but it looked like one. With all kinds of colors. Yeah, or the way back. Yeah. Way to Jagannath Temple's house. It's like, if you painted your house like that, there'd be a riot in the neighborhood. And so you can't paint like that. The real estate value of our homes would drop. So, as Westerners, we have a lot of things that we could say would be discouraging. So I think we can say that Prabhupada was teaching us that although you have reason to be discouraged, don't focus on those reasons. So we saw that with Prabhupada. I mean, look at Prabhupada's leaders. Almost every year, one of his main leaders either left ISKCON or left with some woman or married another woman he was married. But this was very common. It's very discouraging. The people you're depending on are not setting an example. How do you have a movement? Can you imagine being in Prabhupada's position and your most trusted man just is gone? That's it. I don't believe in Krishna. But that happened very regularly.
I believe that the problem is that when someone is falling down or doing something horrible, a devotee, we are not losing faith in this person, but we may lose faith in the process itself.
Yeah,
Especially
definitely.
when a devotee was practicing Krishna consciousness for a long time and you see that he...
Yeah, that's rest. That's a different point. I was speaking from Prabhupada's perspective. What you said is true, but it's a different point. So, Prabhupada had lots, my point is he had lots of reasons to be discouraged. Just as we do. So, I have a little mantra, don't notice what you notice. But don't notice it too much. Because you want to make a t-shirt, don't notice what you notice, or you could get in trouble. You don't notice what you notice, or you could get very discouraged.
But how to notice it, but not to be discouraged? Because
Well, you can't avoid noticing it, that's for sure. Because you know, if I if I put my attention on this, I will get discouraged. So although you notice it, you can't. When I say don't notice what you notice, I mean don't put your attention on what you notice, because that's what will discourage you.
sometimes we may want to put attention not because of us, but because we want to improve our movement for benefit for everyone.
So that won't discourage you if you do something. But if you just, focus on it, don't do anything, you'll get discouraged. You'll get... The reason we have service is because there are problems, and we're trying to solve problems through service. But that's actually the solution to focusing. That's actually the practice of not noticing. Because once you focus on the solution, you're not really noticing it anymore. Because now you're focused on the solution. So it's definitely a fact that if you allow yourself to notice the negative, it will have a negative effect. If you notice, so you notice it long enough to fix it, or to understand it, what needs to be fixed. Just like as a manager, you notice all these things going wrong, you analyze them in order that you can fix them, work on them. So that has a different effect. So that's principle 1. The principle 2 is, what can I do in my life, if anything, to make the situation better? And this doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to make the trash problem better or any of these problems better, but it may mean what can I do within my capacity to just make things better example. So, one of the things we know that Prabhupada said in terms of creating solutions. We just heard this today in one seminar. A devotee was saying, they are creating a problem. They meaning the leaders. And Prabhupada said, what did Prabhupada say? Don't say they, say we, or say me, or say I. He said, you are also they, because you're also part of ISKCON. So don't say they. Say we or me. Was anyone at that seminar? From the Sringananda? Anybody? The letter was something like, no, Prabhupada said, don't say they, say you. Don't say they're the problem, say you're the problem. So, so Prabhupada always said, if there's a problem, the solution is to not be the problem. Because sometimes we see the problem, but we're still the problem. We're also the problem. At least we're not the solution. We're maybe neutral. So be doing something that's going to have a positive influence. Because if you do something that has a positive influence, what does that do to your consciousness? It makes it positive, right? So even though you're seeing negative, but you're doing your part. So you walked in, you said, there's so much trash. So one day you just get a bag, I'm going out all day, I'm going to pick up all the trash. Although the next day it's all going to be back because someone's going to come and dump their trash. But at least you did something. rather than complain. So it has a very positive effect on your consciousness. The other thing, which Prabhupada said, and I want to analyze, he said, as you may know, he said, when you see a problem and you're complaining about it, you also obviously are thinking, what would be the right thing? In your mind you think, this is wrong, so you naturally think, what's right, isn't it? If this is wrong, then, why are devotees doing this? They should do this. You just don't understand what's wrong generally without understanding what's right. So Prabhupada said, so do what's right. And he said the power of doing what's right is that it has influence. Because what I've seen in our movement, it's very rare that a group of people do something right over a period of time and it doesn't get noticed. If it is something which is better than the current status quo, it gets noticed. Oh, and everyone would say, I went to this temple, it's amazing. The devotees are so happy, they're so inspired, they do this, they do that, they're eating on leaf plates, there's no plastic, whatever it is. They have this amazing family atmosphere, and there's no criticism, etc., etc. It doesn't go without notice. I've never seen that. So part of the solution, and you may not think it's a solution, you do the right thing over a period of time, it eventually gets noticed. It has an effect. And the other effect it has, which I've also seen, is that someone may see what you're doing and say, yes, I want to do this in my temple, and they go back. And they do it in their temple, and then somebody else visiting that temple sees it. So you don't always realize how much influence you have by doing the right thing. So, it's a kind of power that you have when you can't directly solve a problem. It's like, I can't change the management of this temple. They didn't invite me in. I was even invited in, and they wanted to one temple, and they didn't listen to me. So even you're invited in, they may not listen. What to speak of not invited? But when you set a good example, it has an effect. And if the example is very good, and a lot of people follow it in one part of the world, it can have a huge effect on devotees in other parts of the world. Have you had that experience? Have you seen that? You've heard about some program? Yes? We were saying the other day, when we were in Jagannath Temple, we were talking about Jayananda. And Jayananda was very pure. And he wasn't a big manager. I think he was temple president, but for a period of time, but it wasn't, his influence was not so much through his management, because most of what he did himself. He wasn't like what do you call that, delegator so much. He was very active. So it wasn't like he had hundreds of men and they were doing so many things. He was doing it, but he had tremendous influence on people because of who he was. And he made lots of devotees without, you could say, systematically trying, just because of who he was. So don't underestimate the power of your example and how it will influence people. And I've had this experience many, many times. And it's so inspiring for me when someone will come up to me, and this happens, not often, but it happens. I met you in 1972, and they remember what I told them. And said, and you told me this, and I never forgot it, and that's helped me so much. And I've been a devotee 2 years. And who would think after 2 years I'd have anything I'd say would have any lasting value. So you don't know. You don't always know the effect of a good example or the right advice. And so sometimes you say, I want to solve this problem, but I can't because no one's going to listen to me. Or I'm a young devotee, or I'm a woman, Or I'm in India and they don't want to hear from me because I'm a Westerner, whatever it is. So you do something somewhere else that sets an example of what you think is proper behavior or proper culture within our movement. And then you try to create that within your influence, within your sphere, within your ashram, within your project. And at least I have found, and I think you would find also, when you're doing something positive, it gives you the sense that things, at least I can create something better. Although I can't solve this problem, but over here I can create something better. You know, it's kind of like this plant is dying and I can't save it, but I could plant something over here, that kind of thing. But I really want to save this plant. You can't. It's too late. So, you know, the tomato plant is dying. Plant carrots and potatoes, something like that. You're not. Maybe tomatoes won't grow here. There's too many insects, whatever. So, the point is that Prabhupada said, in many places, and in Nectar of Instruction, Utsahan means enthusiasm, you have to have enthusiasm to be successful. You cannot be successful in anything. What to speak of controlling your mind and senses and spreading Krishna consciousness, because the gravity of the world is going totally against us. It's just falling on our head, isn't it? So you need enthusiasm to push through that gravity. In anything, you need enthusiasm. And so enthusiasm is a very precious commodity for your bhakti. I feel like getting up. Not good. I don't feel like chanting. Not good. I really don't feel like doing service. Not good. I really don't feel like reading. Not good. I know I shouldn't gossip, but I just feel like gossiping. You know, all of this is not good when you lose enthusiasm. So what do you think happens to a devotee who loses enthusiasm? What do you think happens? We have this saying in America, he's a sitting duck. You know what that means? Do you understand sitting duck? The people, hunters, if the duck is moving, it's a harder target, but if he stops, then it's easy. So you don't want to be a sitting duck for Maya. And if you lose enthusiasm, you're a sitting duck for Maya. That's for sure. So Utsahan is the first thing. So if I were to summarize everything I'm saying into a few sentences, we would say, you have to protect your enthusiasm. And part of that protection is you have to protect yourself from negativity. And we're surrounded by negativity. So we have to be enthusiastic in sometimes a very negative environment. And therefore we sometimes have to be very laser focused of this is the service I'm doing. And I'm happy because I'm doing it to the best of my ability. And I'm creating a culture within the people I influence. Or within my family. And that becomes a source of inspiration. Enthusiasm. Whatever you have to do to be enthusiastic, do it. Whatever you have to do to avoid becoming discouraged, avoid it. It's an important principle. So, not noticing what you notice means not focusing on the negative. Unless you're focused on it to do something positive. Otherwise, it'll destroy you. And we can say many, many, many devotees who have left ISKCON were discouraged. And what precipitated the discouragement was the focus on the faults of devotees, faults of leaders, and all the things that are going wrong. Now, I was thinking today, ISKCON could be criticized, and it has been criticized. But the criticism is a little bit like complaining about a hospital because there's sick people in the hospital. Why are these sick people there? Hospitals supposed to cure people. Well, they didn't get sick in the hospital. They came in sick. So we're bringing people in, they're already sick. You know, sometimes people complain, your devotees do this and that. But we brought them in sick. So because we're bringing in conditioned souls, there's so many things go wrong, and so many things to complain about, and so many discouraging things. And if we're going to be successful and be able to stay in ISKCON, we have to be able to deal with this, because it's a reality. And I deal with it all the time. And occasionally I cave in for like a day. I'm just like, oh, it's so bad. You know, if I see too many bad things consecutively, then I come home and I complain for a day.
Maybe the problem are like unreasonable expectations. Because like I have one friend, she became devotee 2 years ago, and she's like very successful businesswoman. She's very rich, and she's like really a big company. And when she became a devotee, after a while she became very discouraged. She told me, I escaped from people I didn't want to be around, and when I came to Krishna consciousness, I found out that sometimes those people, those devotees are
They
worse,
snuck in the back door.
like worse than people I knew before.
Yeah.
She's having a huge problem dealing with it because she expected devotees to be better, to be different, to be...
I think we all do. That's very difficult. So Krishna Karshan is saying, naturally you expect devotees to be more ideal than non-devotees, but sometimes they do the same things, or they sometimes do something worse. And as we were saying earlier, because they're devotees, you're more discouraged. Maybe 5 times, 10 times, 100 times. The higher up, the more times, isn't it? Okay, it's a new bhakta, whatever. There's a letter like this. Prabhupada wrote to a woman who complained that the book distributors weren't very kind externally. And what Prabhupada wanted to see was behind the problem, there was a devotee trying to be Krishna conscious but not very mature. But there was, it's like, you may be beautiful inside, but outside you're not that beautiful. Something like that. The intention was there, but they weren't very mature. And so and so Prabhupada said, in this particular instance, I think the lady said they weren't very friendly, or they were a little harsh. And Prabhupada said because they were immature, they tend to be a little bit aggressively against the things they're attached to. So if they like something, they tend to try to destroy it because they don't know how to handle it. So sometimes they're not so nice to people because they're afraid of them and afraid of their influence. Like in our movement we see, sometimes women are mistreated, but often when you analyze it, they're not mistreated, they're treated that way by a man who, because he's attached, in order to protect himself, is using repulsion as the medicine to cure or to deal with the attachment. Right? We've seen that. Or it could be anything. It doesn't have to be a woman. It could be anything. Repulsion becomes the mechanism for detachment when you're attached to something. Isn't it? It's artificial. So Prabhupada was making this point to this woman and then saying, we have to see deeper. So it's true what you're saying, the expectation is a problem. And I think that's also Prabhupada's making that point indirectly, but he's making the point, see something deeper than. And then we go back to the point of, well, It's like Prabhupada is inviting all the sick people into the hospital. So, I think at least it can help us tremendously if we appreciate the fact that those sick people are trying to be devotees. And if you're upset by the behavior, just imagine how difficult it is for them. You're upset and you're not in their body. They're in that body all the time. And they're doing things that upset you. How hard is their life? They're trying to be Krishna conscious at the same time. They're proud, or they're exploiting other devotees. So those are thoughts. And there always has to, if there's something that's discouraging, then if you can't ignore it, if it's a real problem, you can't ignore it. There has to be a way to adjust how you see it so it doesn't discourage you. So this is a case. Okay, person is not acting according to my expectation, but then I have to see, okay, he's a conditioned soul. He's trying to be a devotee. Despite his conditioning, he's still trying to be a devotee. That's glorious. And so it starts to neutralize the negativity. It's like you expect devotees to do this. And you say, in spite of the fact that they're troubled, they're still trying to be devotees. They're still active. You want to hear an interesting story? Prabhupada put Giriraj Swami in charge of Juhu. Juhu, after they opened, he became the temple president. And Giriraj Swami is not really a manager. He's more of a philosopher, writer, preacher. And very good at cultivating people. And the devotees were wondering, why, Prabhupada, why did you make him the temple president? Because we know management is not his nature. Prabhupada said, because I know once I put him in charge, he'll stay here, he won't leave. And so many people will leave him. He said, I know he won't leave. So I'm sure many devotees were frustrated sometimes with Giriraj Swami and his management, because it's not what he does well. So I'm sure people came to Prabhupada and said, well, there's this problem and that problem. The Prabhupada's vision was, no, but he's the best because he's the most stable, the most steady. So, sometimes you have to adjust the way you're seeing things. Very, very common problem that I see is you have someone running the temple and not really ideally suited to run the temple. And so the temple is, it's going okay, it's clean, and, the bills are being paid. But it's not really growing, it's not dynamic, it's not the nature of the president to do that. And it's frustrating, but there's no one else to do it. So you're dwelling on this, the president's not good. But, well, who do you have? Nobody. So why dwell on it if you have no solution? Right? So sometimes we're going to have to be able to accept it, even though we don't like it, even though it doesn't suit our expectations, we'll have to be able to accept it because there's nothing we can do. And a lot of times, when the person complaining about the president is asked, well, you want to be president? What's the answer? Pretty much 100% of the time, no. And I think it's a good question to ask, because when the person says no, he realizes that, well, I don't want to do it because it's a hard job. So he's kind of happy that he's doing it, even though he's not doing such a good job. At least it's better than nobody. Although that could be argued. Maybe some temples, maybe nobody's better than a bad temple president. But generally, somebody's better than nobody. Yes?
some people have this habit, and this my family has, like, if they don't have anything good to talk about, they just go on talking about that.
It may be true, but the point of this lecture was to be aware of how it affects us if we do that. Now, in some cases, it may be so disturbing that you just have to get out of that environment. You can't work there. It's like you listen to my lecture 100 times and still, it's just like I can't stop thinking about this. It's disturbing me. Then in that case, it may be advisable to distance yourself, because it could have a very bad effect on you. And it could breed offenses as well. So that's another thing. If I'm dwelling on something negative and in the behavior of a devotee, it's very easy that just evolves into offenses. Isn't it? So that's another danger. You'll get discouraged, that's one danger, but you'll make offenses. That's even more dangerous. Because if you're looking at something that's bad, what's the logical conclusion? Who's in charge and why are they allowing this to happen? And then the offense is very easy to make, right? And I can guarantee you, if you appreciate devotees, you'll be a lot happier than if you would offend them. And I wouldn't recommend you experiment with that, but take my word, and you probably already have experience of this, right? I was speaking to Vishnamurti. He is in charge of what's called Vanapedia. They have a booth here, to preserve and promote Prabhupada's teachings. He said they've translated in his work of putting videos of Prabhupada up online. Have any of you seen those short videos, like 15 minutes, 10 minutes? Something like 67 languages he's done already. And then if you go by his booth, he has these titanium plaques with Prabhupada's words on it. And I said, what's that? He said, I want to print all of Prabhupada's teachings on. It'll take 9,000 titanium plaques. And the plaques will last for 10,000 years, and we can just store it. The Prabhupada's teachings will be stored on these plaques. And then he mentioned about how we can bring different plaques out and put them up. I forget what he was thinking. So people can read them, or maybe you buy your own plaques. So I just, I saw what he was doing, and I said, this is amazing what you're doing. He's doing so many other things. And it didn't matter to me how he's doing it or who he is. It's just, I just saw this is amazing service, and I naturally appreciated it. So it's not difficult to appreciate people if you have that angle to see what are they doing. Then I went to another booth, and this devotee produced a new mridanga. It's fiberglass. Have you seen the new one? It's really good. I mean, it's pretty close to a clay drum. In fact, I have an old clay drum, and his drum is better than my old clay drum. And I said, how long will it last? And he said, 10 years. But there's no reason it wouldn't last forever. So I was thinking about this when I left, and said, here's one person who had an idea. Obviously he had to spend a lot of money and time. He must be an engineer. And he produced this amazingly good, yes, it's an ugly drum. It looks like from a space movie. And probably he'll refine it in the future. But it sounds quite good, and it's very light. And as you go from booth to booth, you see what they're doing. Children's materials, online code, it's like one or two people doing something positive. And the fact is, if they were focused on all the problems in ISKCON, they couldn't do that. because one devotee, Gaurangi Gandharvika, she came out with a children's book. It looks like it's 300 pages and it's in full color. I said, how long did it take you to make? He said, 3 years. I wanted to tell you a story. This is I think it's a very important story. If you know anything about the history of ISKCON, you know there was a time in ISKCON when things were really difficult. And some of our leaders had fallen down. And it was very disturbing because at that time, most of the movement was still Prabhupada disciples, or at least half. So, when a leader's having trouble, there's 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 Prabhupada disciples watching it. And so as God brothers, God sisters, we feel very free to speak our minds. And so everyone was talking about it because we were all disturbed and we were angry and upset. And for a period of a few years in ISKCON, it was occupying the minds of many, many devotees. And we were spending lots of time talking about the problems. And during that time, there were a few devotees who were not talking about problems, but they were going out and making things happen. And after a while, we realized, while we were talking about the problems and there was nothing we could do, these other people were out making things happen. So I think it's instructive. And we realized it after a while. We said, what have we been doing for the last few years? We're just talking about the problems, but we never did anything. And so problems can easily occupy your mind. And it's very easy to talk about them. And so if you look at all these booths, you'll realize these people are not talking about problems. They're actually doing something. I went to another devotee. He showed me. He's got an online course for kids. It's really good. I said, how long did it take? He said, well, for 6 months, I've basically worked all day and night. So how could you not like a devotee like that, even if you don't like them? There's like so much to like about them. So if you just see, you go from booth to booth and you see innovative ideas everywhere. How could you not like them? So we appreciate them, we appreciate their service, and then we learn from them that they were very positive and they didn't allow themselves to be sidetracked. If you allow yourself to be sidetracked, it's going to be difficult for you. You agree? Yeah. Question?
I have one more question that when we see in the movement that you have to use sometimes some diplomacy or some shrewdness to achieve some position in order to serve devotees, there are chances that you yourselves get contaminated with that.
You'll be damaged.
Yeah.
Damage yourself.
Yeah. You may start it in the name of service to devotees, but when we get the position, then you start using it for sense gratification.
Okay. I need a position to be more effective in my service. Okay, that's practical, right? You're given a position because you're qualified, you need it to be effective. And then you get the position, you get some honor, you get some facility. And you think, well, everyone in ISKCON who has a position gets some honor and facility, and they all take advantage of it. So why not me? That kind of the question. And then the last half of the question is, maybe I shouldn't take the position. Of course, the obvious answer is take the position and don't get affected. And we were talking about this on the way over, and I said that in my experience of working with leaders who did things which I thought were wrong, or in some cases very bad, it actually helped me tremendously in connecting with what was very important for me. because a lot of times when I saw them doing something, I made a note in my mind that said to me, note, don't ever do that to anybody. And the note was it became a samskara. It made a deep impression. So I think that's the best way to take it. If you don't take it that way, then true, when you get in that position, you'll probably do it because that's what the person before you did, and that normalizes it. And maybe beyond even normalizing it, it makes you think you're actually supposed to do that. That's how managers become expedient in their service. But if you know before you're in that position that it's wrong, that when you get in that position, you have a better chance of not succumbing because you know the temptation and you've made a mental note, that's not what I want to do, it's wrong. It's not pleasing to Prabhupada. So a lot of times we get trapped because we don't even know our own values. Right? So you say, I get in that position, then whatever I do, I exploit or whatever. That means you haven't solidified your values because you allowed yourself to do that. Or maybe you lie because you haven't solidified your values. Like we had discussed this in the workshop. You haven't consciously created rules in your life of what is allowable and what's not allowable. But once you have those rules, it doesn't matter what the person before you did. You won't do it if it's not your rule. But if you don't even know your rules, then yeah, you could do anything. Or rationalize anything. I mean, imagine going to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada saying, why did you cheat this devotee, or why did you lie to this devotee? And you said, because this other leader did it. What do you think Prabhupada would say? That he's going to validate what you did because someone else, you did something wrong, and he's going to validate it because someone else did something wrong, or did the same thing wrong? There's no way. So it's a principle of integrity, that I do what's right no matter what, even if there's opportunity to do something wrong, and even if it's more practical to do it wrong. There may be exceptions, but in general, that's the idea. And again, it goes back to Prabhupada's answer. If you don't like what someone's doing, then do what you think is better and set the example. So you could think that. See, what he is saying is like, you have a culture in ISKCON, and in some places the culture is that the leaders maybe take a little advantage of their position. And if you disagree with that, and you get in the position of leadership, you can start to change the culture. Because the higher you go up in the organization, the more power you have to change the culture. Because the culture is changed from the top. It's established from the top, and it's changed from the top. Because whatever the leaders do, everybody says, that's normal. That's what you're supposed to do. Right? Isn't it? So that's another way of thinking. Okay, let me take the position. Even though others have misused it, if I can use it properly, I get a chance to contribute to changing the culture. And if I can train the people under me to do the right thing, then gradually maybe we can change the culture. That's how I would think. And you're going to have to take positions where there's temptation in order to do service. You have to deal with men, women, money, power, buildings, all these things. You have to deal with it. So if you can't handle it, you're limiting what you can do in terms of service. Right? So we have to learn how to handle it. Right? Hare Krishna. I am a servant. I'm not master. That's it. Okay, we have 3 minutes. You all look like you're ready to go to sleep. I know how to wake you up. Pizza and ice cream. Sorry, we don't have any. But at least it woke you up. Yes.
Thank you very much for your
Hare Krishna.
inspiration words. I want to share my realization. Okay, I speak to Polish, okay?
Speak Polish.
Pamiętam jak w latach 90. mój już duchowy odszedł. No, czy tam później.
He would like to share some of his realizations. He remember when his guru left.
Nie. Miałem też problem, czy w ogóle mantrować, czy czytać zasady i tak dalej. No to był duży problem dla uczniów.
And I had a problem if I should continue chanting and like practicing Krishna consciousness, and it became a problem for many of his disciples.
Sobie przypomniałem, że jest Prabhupada.
And then I found out that there is Prabhupada.
You found out?
No, in the sense that
You could take shelter.
that he can take shelter in Prabhupada, and he's like stable. And he's gonna be always there, and
That was your
This
stability.
time is very big problem because many devotees,
Yeah.
many.
Yeah.
Hate my guru.
Yeah. That's another issue.
Offended.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a good point.
You know about.
Yeah.
It's a very big problem. But I consider that I'm happy, lucky man.
Well, wow. We have gulab jamuns today.
healthy gulab jamun.
They're green, very juicy.
But I have a question.
I just want to comment. I think one principle we can get from this is that he found a stabilizing force to hold on to when there was a difficulty, because his life was going like this, or basically going down. He found something. You're falling down a mountain and you grab, there's a tree branch coming and you grab. He found something to grab onto, and so when things are difficult, we need something positive to grab onto. Yes. You had a question?
Just a short question. How to, because you said that appreciation is so important, appreciation of devotees, and I was wondering how to appreciate someone that we really don't like. Because it's easy to appreciate someone we like, and but when...
Well, there is a saying, if I don't like the person, I need to get to know them better. So let me get to know them, and I'll like them better. Okay, we'll end class here, and we'll distribute green gulab jamuns. Sorry you don't get yours, because you're not present. Hare Krishna.
Kids.